Rolf, again, I will repeat myself, but now in front of the audience, it's really a privilege to count with you, with your film, and with you in this moment in person. First of all, let us understand, you have been born in Netherlands, but you have been working recently, all your films are taking place in Australia, and not only in Australia as a country, but mainly with Aborigines. So how do you get to be involved with those communities? Why you started being interested in that particular people in the history and the real time of Australia, being a Dutch?
Okay. I emigrated to Australia when I was 8 years old, with my parents. And so I had a bit of my childhood in Holland, but more of my childhood in Australia. And I feel perfectly Australian. So that's the first thing. I did most of my schooling in Australia. The topic of Aboriginal people was for me the same it was for most people in Australia. You're a little bit aware of it, but it doesn't much impact on you yourself. Until I was commissioned to write a screenplay for a producer, which was a first contact story. And during this commission, I visited a community and I did a lot of research from books and so on. And I discovered a history of white Australia and Aboriginal people that was different to the history I had been taught at school. Now, out of that research came not the film that I was commissioned, but out of it came The Tracker, which was a film I did with David Gulpilil, who is the preeminent, the best, the most marvellous of the Aboriginal actors in Australia. And through David, I learnt a lot more. He invited me to his community and I visited there. He constantly wanted me to do more films with him, with his community, with his people. And out of that came then, after I did another film in between, out of that then came 10 Canoes. And then I did 2 more other different films completely.
Yeah.
And then David was in trouble and he was in jail and he needed something very badly. And out of that came Charlie's Country. So 3 of the 14 films I've done have had Aboriginal subjects, and so I'm now best known for that. But it just was something that really developed over the years and was drawn along very strongly by David, who was so keen always to tell his stories and the stories of his people.
There is a small documentary you have made, which is included in the DVD. I think it's a British or maybe American, I can't remember now, about 10 Canoes, which came with a small documentary where you tell how you have been working with David. And David still is living in his own place, as far as I understand. And David is living in his own community. Not anymore. But you have to go through him around. How is it?
So, I met the community through David, and then in 2003, David left his community completely. Okay. Then we made 10 Canoes, not with David. The collaboration started with David, but a year and a half before we shot the film.
Yeah.
Okay, we had no script. We just had the idea with David. Then he left the community, and he has not lived there since. He lives in Darwin or Adelaide. But by then I knew other people in the community, and we worked with other people in the community. And so projects like that documentary and the website project 12canoes.com.au, they were done with my partner Molly, and we consistently went back to the community and formed a very strong relationship with the community, quite separate to David. And in fact, in some small way, we have been peacemakers for David and the community.
I understand. If one thinks about the three films that you have done, the first one, it could be thought in terms of a Western. The second one is a kind of mythical film. And the third one is daily Australian life. So that was something that you thought in advance, because there are different approaches on the three films.
I never thought I would make three films, and I never thought of them as being linked when I made them. Somebody discovered this, and we call it now the accidental trilogy. But I think about each film, how to tell that story the best. Mm-hmm. And so the style of these three films is very different, because they are different subjects, and therefore for me, the story must be told in a different way. The story must be told in the way that best suits that subject and the circumstances of making that film. So our circumstances with 10 Canoes were very different than our circumstances with the Tracker. And again with Charlie's Country.
Well, your last film, of course, is Charlie's Country. It opened firstly in Australia, then it was in Cannes last year in May, where I saw the film, in fact. And but let's talk about this last film you made, again with David, of course. And there is a couple of things which happens in the film that maybe you can explain us, for our audience especially, also, that maybe we are or they are not. They don't know about how it works right nowadays. The relationship between a small or community for Aboriginals and the real society, if you want to say, of Australia. This community which have to obey the white fellows' law, how it works? It is like that, as you show in the film. There are many communities like that. How it is?
Let me try and explain to you, audience, although I would prefer to be doing this with you after the film, but we do it now. Okay. Australian Aboriginal people, we have intellectuals and lawyers and doctors. We have people who live in the desert still very close to how they lived for a long time. And we have everything in between. So that's the first thing to know. Now, Aboriginal people are maybe 3% of Australian society, and about half of that 3% still live in very remote communities, desert, or like where the film takes place, a little community called Ramingining, which is very remote. So to the nearest chemist shop, the nearest pharmacy, is probably 400 kilometres away. That is how remote it is. And these communities are Australia. So the law of Australia applies, but because they are so remote, in the past the law was a little bit easy. So the rules were not so strict. But in 2007, the government took over many of these communities and put in police stations and all that, and began to say, you must follow the rules more exactly. And that is the time in which this film is set.
There is a, I don't want to say what is happening in the film, because the people are going to be watching the film in less than a few minutes.
Yep.
But there is something which, if you have ever, any viewer watching from Australia, and if there is any particularly aboriginal situation, we always see that the alcohol, it's a problem in their life. How is the historical settle which makes the Australian Aboriginals to be, to be attracted to alcohol? Because it's a problem that you address in the film.
It is a problem with almost every what we might call, it's not primitive, but almost every community that has been subject to colonial rule, that has been taken over by usually Western powers, every native community, they have that same problem. Okay, they have the problem with alcohol. So Native Americans in United States and in Canada, it's the same problem. The Maori, same problem in New Zealand. So it is not that Aboriginal people are unique, because they are not. They are a powerless community, and through lack of power comes a desolation that makes people want to drink more, to make life easier for themselves. There are so many sociological reasons why this is so, that I can't speak fairly or accurately about them. Yes, they exist. That you see them all the time is wrong, because the problem doesn't exist all the time. And in the film, it doesn't exist all the time. So it is part of life. It is not the thing that dominates life. It is, we have alcoholics in Argentina, where you live. We have alcoholics in white Australia as well, and they have a problem.
If one remembers, like Walkabout, the first film made by David, and you see this one particularly, I think in a moment, meanwhile I was watching the film, beyond the story, beyond the narrative, it can be seen like a kind of portrait of David in itself. And especially that last shot, which is outstanding, when you just look at him, you keep the camera, and then the credits are rolling. It's such an elegant way to close in the film. But how do you direct as an actor to David, or how is David in a film?
David is, of course, a very, very experienced actor, and he is something of an artistic genius. He was a great dancer when he could still dance so well. So he's very experienced. He is wonderfully a combination of the intellectual and the instinctive, from the heart and from the brain, both, as an actor. And he and I know each other very well now, over all these years, so that he understands from me what I'm looking for in a way that is rare, because he's very good at picking what people think, but he can judge even from my body language more than from the words that I speak. So in that way, we can find a performance that really shines.
Yeah, it really shines. Well, Rolf, we are extremely thankful. I would love to proceed with this interview and to be more precise, but that will be to reveal the film in front of our audience. So I rather stop talking, and I invite you, if you want to say a final words to our audience.
I'm sorry to be saying goodbye to you when the film is just about to start. I have had 2 weeks in Argentina some 3, 4, 5 years ago, and they were 2 wonderful weeks, and I wish I was there with you again now. It is not to be, but I do hope that you enjoy the film as much as audiences everywhere in the world have enjoyed the film, and I thank you for coming. Goodbye.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much.